What happens when the bond of marriage turns into something darker? When love, trust, and companionship transform into a deadly spiral that leads two people down a path of destruction so horrifying, it ends in the ultimate punishment, death? We often think of marriage as a promise of unity, of sharing a life together. But for these couples, their union became the foundation for a reign of terror that shocked the nation. In this video, we plunge into the most notorious couples sent to death row in prison, and please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more crime-chilling updates. Number 1. Cynthia Kaufman and James Gregory Marlowe. Cynthia Kaufman, born in the early 1960s, Kaufman's upbringing in California was marked by instability and a troubled childhood. As a teenager, she struggled with various issues, from substance abuse to minor run-ins with the law. Her early relationships were volatile, and she eventually met James Gregory Marlowe, a man with his own troubled past. Marlowe, born in 1963, had a history of violent behavior. He was known to have had run-ins with law enforcement from a young age and had served time for lesser crimes. It was during a stint in prison that he met Kaufman, and the two formed a bond that would soon become deadly. In 1986, Kaufman and Marlowe's relationship took a dark turn. They were involved in the kidnapping, mistreatment, and murder of several women in California. The couple targeted vulnerable women, often kidnapping them, holding them captive, and subjecting them to physical abuse and psychological torment. They operated in isolation, staying off the radar for some time as they committed these horrific acts. The couple's first known victim was Susan Barnes, who they abducted in a secluded area. After holding her captive for days, they tortured and eventually killed her. Over the next few months, they repeated this pattern, growing bolder with each crime. Law enforcement was left scrambling as the bodies piled up, all while the couple remained elusive. After several women went missing in 1986, authorities began to piece together the connections between the disappearances. There were vague descriptions of a man and a woman seen near the abduction sites. The investigation took a turn when witnesses came forward after a victim narrowly escaped, managing to give a detailed description of the couple. Investigators linked Kaufman and Marlowe to the crimes through forensic evidence, including DNA samples left at one of the crime scenes. The couple was eventually traced back to an isolated cabin in Northern California. A high-stakes standoff led to their capture, but not before they attempted to flee. The trial of Kaufman and Marlowe was one of the most sensational in California during the late 1980s. Both defendants were charged with multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and torture. Kaufman's defense argued that she was under Marlowe's control and that her involvement was coerced. However, Marlowe's defense team painted him as a cold-blooded killer, and the evidence against both of them was overwhelming. The jury found both Kaufman and Marlowe guilty. Kaufman was sentenced to life in prison without parole, while Marlowe was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Despite attempts at appealing her sentence, Kaufman's life in prison remained a reality. She served time in various state facilities but was never granted parole. Marlowe's execution was delayed multiple times due to legal challenges, but he spent the remainder of his life on death row. He died in prison in the early 2000s, never seeing his execution carried out. Before her sentencing, Kaufman expressed remorse, stating she was truly sorry for the pain and suffering she had caused the families of the victims. However, many saw her words as empty, considering her role in the killings. Marlowe, on the other hand, remained defiant, claiming that his actions were justified by his own twisted sense of justice. His final words were marked by anger and resentment, reflecting his belief that he had been wronged by society. The case left a lasting impact on the California community and became a symbol of the dangers posed by toxic criminal relationships. Kaufman's life sentence was marked by numerous attempts to appeal her conviction, but she remains incarcerated today. Marlowe's death remains a chilling reminder of the horrific violence the couple inflicted on their victims. What do you think of Cynthia Kaufman and James Gregory Marlowe's story? Were they truly a product of their environment, or were they just monsters? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling true crime stories. But what happens when another notorious couple on death row meets a similar fate? Stay tuned as we dive into another shocking case of love turned lethal. Number 2. Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck, the Lonely Hearts couple. Born in 1914 in New York City, Raymond Fernandez had a troubled early life. He was the son of Spanish immigrants and struggled with social isolation, which led to feelings of inadequacy. His appearance was less than striking, and he often had trouble with women. In the 1940s, he turned to personal ads as a way to connect with women, seeking companionship. However, his quest for love would spiral into something far darker. Martha Beck, born in 1920 in Florida, was a lonely, overweight woman with a difficult childhood. She suffered from mental health issues including depression, which compounded her feelings of isolation. After a failed marriage and a tragic personal life, Beck responded to Fernandez's personal ad in 1947. Her vulnerabilities and Fernandez's manipulation would eventually lead them both down a terrifying path of crime. In 1947, Fernandez and Beck began using Lonely Hearts ads to lure women into their lives. Fernandez would write a personal ad, often promising marriage and affection. Once the women arrived, he would seduce them, and Beck, sometimes posing as Fernandez's sister or a loving companion, would help in manipulating the women into trusting them. Their crimes escalated when they began robbing and killing the women who answered the ads. Their first known victim was Jeanette Horan, who was murdered in 1947 after being lured by Fernandez's ad. Following this, the couple went on to kill at least 3 more women. They would take the women to remote locations, bind and gag them, and suffocate them. Sometimes the women were also tortured, increasing the horror of their crimes. As their killing spree progressed, they became more brazen, luring more victims. As the bodies of the women began to pile up, detectives grew suspicious of Fernandez and Beck, especially after a series of women went missing after answering personal ads. However, it wasn't until a woman named Esther Dingle, who had narrowly escaped their clutches, came forward that the investigation began to take shape. Dingle's testimony provided crucial details, allowing police to link Fernandez and Beck to the killings. When police searched their apartment, they found evidence of the murders, including personal belongings from the victims. Fernandez and Beck were apprehended in 1949, after a dramatic standoff. During their arrest, they were found to be in possession of more belongings from their victims, sealing their fate. The trial of the Lonely Hearts killer couple became a national sensation. Both were charged with multiple counts of murder. The prosecution painted them as cold-blooded killers who used the innocence of others to fuel their twisted desire for control and power. Fernandez's defense team tried to claim that he was mentally unstable, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Beck, on the other hand, argued that she had been manipulated by Fernandez, though her own role in the murders seemed undeniable. Both were found guilty and sentenced to death. The judge expressed horror at the extent of their brutality, particularly the role Beck played in the murders. Fernandez and Beck were both sentenced to death by electric chair. Their execution became one of the most widely publicized in the 1950s, given the horrific nature of their crimes and the disturbing connection between love and murder in their case. In the days leading up to her execution, Beck expressed some remorse for her actions, claiming that she had been under the control of Fernandez, though many saw this as an attempt to avoid the death sentence. Raymond Fernandez, cold to the end, showed little remorse for his actions. His final words were short and emotionless, expressing no regret for the lives he had taken. Martha Beck, however, expressed a deep sense of guilt in her final moments. Her last words were a cry for forgiveness, stating that she was sorry for what she had done. This contrast between the two defendants' final moments added a tragic, haunting depth to the case. Both Fernandez and Beck were executed in 1951, marking the end of their reign of terror. Their case remained one of the most shocking examples of a deadly couple in American criminal history. Over the years, their story has become a cautionary tale, illustrating the dangers of isolation, mental illness, and manipulation within toxic relationships. What do you think about the case of Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck? Was Martha a victim of Raymond's manipulation, or was she just as guilty as he was? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Number 3. Ray and Faye Copeland, the oldest couple sentenced to capital punishment. Born in 1921, Ray Copeland had a rough upbringing and worked as a farmer throughout his life. He was described as a man with a violent streak who seemed to have trouble controlling his anger. By the time he met Faye, he was a man hardened by years of struggling to make a living, which may have contributed to his later crimes. Faye, born in 1935, had a quiet demeanor, and her life seemed unremarkable at first glance. However, as her relationship with Ray grew, so did her willingness to support his darker tendencies. Faye had a history of mental health struggles and was often viewed as subservient to Ray's decisions. Ray and Faye's relationship was built on isolation, with their farm in rural Missouri being far removed from neighbors and the public eye. Ray took control of most matters, and Faye, though passive, would later become complicit in his actions. Ray and Faye Copeland's crimes began in the late 1980s when they began targeting vulnerable drifters passing through their area. Ray would offer them work on his farm, luring them in with promises of food and shelter. After bringing these drifters to the farm, Ray and Faye would murder them, often with a gunshot to the head. The couple would then dispose of the bodies, and in some cases, Ray would even use the drifters' identities to cash checks, continuing the cycle of exploitation and killing. The couple's reign of terror went unnoticed for several years, and they were able to evade suspicion by acting like kind-hearted rural folks offering help to those in need. The investigation into the Copelands' crimes began in 1989 when a drifter named Jimmy Red Thomas went missing. His disappearance raised red flags after a similar pattern of events occurred with other missing men. The police began investigating the Copelands after a routine inquiry into the missing persons linked back to them. As more people began to disappear, the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. A former farmhand of the Copelands came forward and reported witnessing suspicious activity on the farm, including the disposal of bodies. In 1990, investigators discovered the remains of several men buried on the Copeland farm. They also found multiple items that connected the victims to the Copelands, including clothes and personal belongings. After months of investigation, Faye Copeland finally confessed to her involvement, admitting she was complicit in helping Ray kill the drifters. She revealed that she would assist Ray by preparing meals for the victims, then stand by while he killed them. The trial of the Copelands was one of the most shocking in Missouri's history due to their age and the brutal nature of their crimes. The prosecution presented evidence of their manipulation and killing spree, while defense attorneys tried to argue that Ray was the sole instigator. During the trial, the court learned that while Faye was not as physically involved in the killings, she had facilitated and enabled Ray's actions. She was deemed an accomplice in the murders and was considered as guilty as Ray in the eyes of the law. Ray Copeland was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, while Faye was convicted as well but received a lesser sentence due to her age and mental health. Faye was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. In 1990, Ray Copeland was sentenced to death by lethal injection, making him the oldest person on Missouri's death row at the time. His sentence shocked many due to his age and the nature of his crimes. Despite his age, the jury agreed that his crimes were heinous enough to warrant the death penalty. Faye, however, did not receive the death penalty due to her advanced age and the psychological factors taken into account during sentencing. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Ray maintained his innocence until his death, even as he awaited execution. He claimed that he had never killed anyone despite overwhelming evidence. His final words were filled with bitterness and frustration over his situation, expressing his belief that he had been wrongfully convicted. Faye showed more remorse in her later years, expressing regret for her actions, particularly for the role she played in the deaths of innocent men. She was granted some media interviews where she apologized for her complicity. Ray Copeland was executed in 1993 at the age of 72. He became the oldest man to be executed in Missouri at the time. She remained in prison until her death in 2003. She spent her final years in prison, where she reportedly lived in relative obscurity. What do you think about Ray and Faye Copeland's crimes? Do you believe they deserve their sentences? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're interested in hearing more true crime stories like this, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Number 4. Samantha and John Allen, the case of Amy Deal. Born in 1982, Samantha had a troubled background. Growing up in a broken family, she faced emotional and physical abuse that would shape her adult life. She met John Allen in Phoenix, Arizona, and the two formed a relationship that would eventually spiral into horrific violence. Samantha's history with neglect, poor choices, and a series of failed relationships provided a backdrop for her destructive behavior. John, born in 1981, also had a troubled childhood. With a history of criminal behavior and strained family relationships, John met Samantha in the early 2000s. Despite his past, Samantha and John began a relationship, eventually raising children together, though their home environment was anything but stable. In 2011, the couple was responsible for the death of 10-year-old Amy Deal, Samantha's daughter from a previous relationship. Amy had been subjected to severe mistreatment in the months leading up to her death. Both Samantha and John were involved in the physical abuse, with Amy being forced to sleep in a dog kennel and enduring frequent beatings. The abuse reached a horrifying climax when Samantha and John locked Amy outside in extreme heat for hours as a form of punishment. The couple's actions ultimately led to Amy's death from heat stroke. The brutal mistreatment of Amy went unnoticed for weeks, and it wasn't until after her death that law enforcement began to investigate the couple. The details of the abuse shocked the community, leaving a haunting image of the extreme neglect and cruelty Amy suffered in her final days. Amy's body was found in a remote area behind the couple's mobile home. Initial reports indicated that she had been locked outside for hours in the Arizona heat, with no food, water, or protection. After an autopsy revealed the cause of death was heat stroke, investigators began piecing together the timeline of Amy's mistreatment. Police interviewed neighbors and family members, revealing a pattern of neglect and physical abuse that had been escalating for months. It became clear that Amy had been subjected to physical punishment, isolation, and emotional cruelty under the care of Samantha and John Allen. A critical breakthrough came when Samantha Allen's other children were interviewed, and they disclosed the horrific treatment their sister had endured. They revealed that Amy had been forced to sleep in a dog cage, denied basic necessities, and regularly beaten by the couple. The investigation gathered enough evidence to arrest Samantha and John Allen for child abuse and murder. The trial of Samantha and John Allen was a highly publicized and emotional event. The prosecution presented harrowing testimony about the abuse Amy had suffered, including evidence of her physical injuries and the conditions in which she had lived. The defense attempted to claim that the couple's actions were not premeditated and that they had not intended for Amy to die. They also tried to shift the blame onto each other, with Samantha arguing that John had been the more aggressive perpetrator. Despite these attempts, both Samantha and John Allen were convicted of first-degree murder and multiple counts of child abuse. The jury found them both responsible for Amy's tragic death, and they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Both Samantha and John Allen were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The judge expressed the court's horror at the extent of their cruelty, particularly toward a vulnerable child who had been in their care. The couple's sentence sparked emotional responses from the community, as many felt that Amy's life had been stolen by those who should have loved and protected her. In the days leading up to her sentencing, Samantha Allen showed little remorse, though she did express regret about the death of her daughter. She claimed that she never meant for it to go that far, but her words were seen as an attempt to deflect blame rather than an expression of genuine sorrow. John, on the other hand, denied full responsibility for Amy's death, insisting that he had not intended to kill her. His final words were filled with anger and resentment toward the legal system, suggesting that he believed he had been unfairly sentenced. Both Samantha and John Allen attempted to appeal their sentences, but their appeals were rejected. Their case remained a poignant reminder of the dangers of unchecked abuse, especially within a family dynamic. Amy Deal's tragic death led to changes in Arizona's child welfare policies. Advocacy for stronger child protection laws was spurred by the public outcry over the case, ensuring that the memory of Amy's life and death would continue to drive reforms in the system. What do you think about the tragic case of Samantha and John Allen? How do you feel about their sentencing, and what more can be done to protect vulnerable children? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into these chilling true crime cases. But what happens when another couple crosses the line into unimaginable cruelty? Stay tuned as we look into another case of love twisted by violence. Number 5. Lisa Jo Chamberlain and Roger Lee Gillette, the brutal murder of Linda Heinzelman and Vernon Hewlett. Lisa Jo Chamberlain, born in 1973, Lisa's life was marked by a series of challenges, including a history of abuse and involvement with drugs. Her past, filled with troubled relationships and criminal activities, would eventually lead her into an even darker path with Roger. Born in 1974, Roger's life was equally chaotic, marked by criminal offenses and a deepening spiral into addiction. His criminal history included burglaries and thefts, and after multiple run-ins with the law, his path crossed with Lisa's, forming a toxic partnership built on manipulation and crime. Together, Lisa and Roger formed a dangerous bond. Their relationship was fueled by a shared desire for money and a reckless disregard for human life. As their criminal behavior escalated, they would soon commit acts that shocked the community. In 2004, Lisa and Roger murdered Linda Heinzelman and Vernon Hewlett, two acquaintances they knew through their criminal activities. The couple lured their victims into a false sense of security, promising drugs or money, only to violently kill them in cold blood. The murders were part of a robbery gone horribly wrong. Once the victims were inside their home, Lisa and Roger attacked them. After the killings, they staged the crime scene in an attempt to make the murders look like a robbery, hoping to avoid suspicion. Following the murders, Lisa and Roger fled the scene, leaving the bodies behind. They went into hiding and their actions left the community in shock. Investigators soon realized the couple was responsible for the deaths, and a manhunt was launched. Linda and Vernon's bodies were found weeks later in a secluded area, prompting a full-scale investigation. At first, there were no obvious leads, but soon enough, clues connected the victims to Lisa and Roger. Investigators pieced together the puzzle by analyzing phone records, eyewitness statements, and forensic evidence. After a tip-off from a local, authorities tracked down Lisa and Roger, who were hiding out in a small town. Their capture marked the beginning of a new chapter in the investigation. Under questioning, both Lisa and Roger confessed to the murders, revealing their callous and deliberate planning. Their confessions painted a chilling picture of their motivations, showing a clear lack of remorse for their brutal actions. The trial of Lisa and Roger was a long, emotionally intense process. The prosecution painted them as cold-blooded murderers, while the defense tried to argue that their troubled pasts and addiction played a role in the crimes. In the end, their crimes were deemed too heinous to be explained away by their circumstances. Both were charged with first-degree murder and robbery. After hearing testimony from the victims' families and law enforcement officials, the jury convicted them, and the judge sentenced them both to death. The court sentenced Lisa and Roger to death by lethal injection. Their case became one of the most talked about in Arizona, as it was rare for a couple to face the death penalty together. The judge emphasized the horrific nature of the crime and the calculated manner in which it was executed. The public response was divided. Some felt sympathy for their troubled pasts, while others believed the severity of the murders left no room for leniency. The debate around their punishment only grew as their case made headlines. Lisa expressed sorrow for the victims and their families but also hinted at her difficult past. Her final statements suggested regret, but they were overshadowed by her previous attempts to justify the killings. Roger, on the other hand, remained unapologetic even in his final moments. His last words were defiant, indicating his belief that he had been wronged, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. Both Lisa and Roger filed multiple appeals, citing mental health issues and claiming their trials had been unfair. However, their appeals were rejected, and their death sentences remained intact. Roger was executed in 2008, and his death was largely uneventful. Few attended his execution, and there was little media coverage as most people were content with the resolution of the case. Lisa Jo Chamberlain's execution came in 2011, and while there were protests from some who believed she had suffered enough, it was carried out without incident. What are your thoughts on the death penalty for couples like Lisa and Roger? Do you think their troubled histories justified their actions, or was justice served? Leave your comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe for more in-depth true crime cases. The chilling nature of these murders brings to light a much deeper issue within criminal partnerships. But what happens when love and violence intertwine even more intensely? Next, we'll explore another notorious case that will leave you questioning the darkness of human relationships. Number 6. Alvin and Judith Neely, a deadly partnership. Alvin was born in 1948 in Georgia and had a criminal history that spanned several years before meeting his wife, Judith. His past included violent offenses, and he was already considered a dangerous individual by the time he met Judith. His relationship with Judith would later become one of manipulation and coercion, where Alvin played the role of a dominant and controlling partner. Judith Neely, born in 1961, Judith had a troubled childhood in Alabama, marked by physical and emotional abuse. She had a series of relationships before meeting Alvin, and like many others, she found herself under his control. Judith became an accomplice to Alvin's crimes, sharing his desire for violence and thrill-seeking behaviors. Though initially more passive, she soon became an active participant in the couple's spree of terror. Alvin and Judith's relationship developed into one of mutual violence, with Alvin often taking the lead in planning and executing the crimes. Judith, though seemingly more passive, was completely complicit in the horrors they carried out. Their marriage became a deadly partnership that would leave a trail of destruction across Georgia and Alabama. The Neely's crime spree began in 1982, when they abducted a young woman from a remote area in Georgia. They held her captive for days, subjecting her to severe physical abuse. This would be the start of a disturbing pattern that would escalate to include multiple kidnappings and murders. In the following months, the Neely's committed a series of crimes across Georgia and Alabama, targeting young women, often abducting them at gunpoint. The couple would torture, sexually assault, and kill their victims, leaving a path of terror in their wake. The crimes reached a chilling peak with the kidnapping and murder of Tina Marie and Sandra Kay, two women who were found dead under brutal circumstances. It was clear that the couple's crimes were escalating in violence and depravity. The final victim of their spree was 16-year-old Susan Lattimore, who was abducted in Alabama in 1983. Her murder would finally lead to the couple's downfall, as they were eventually caught after a series of mistakes that left traces of evidence behind. The investigation into the Neelus began after the bodies of several women were found in remote areas of Georgia and Alabama. Authorities initially had no clear leads, but the disturbing similarities between the crimes, young women abducted in similar circumstances, tortured and murdered, began to form a pattern. The breakthrough in the case came when Susan Lattimore's body was discovered, and forensic evidence linked her murder to the Neelus. Witnesses reported seeing Alvin and Judith in the area around the time of her disappearance, and further investigation revealed a history of violence associated with them. A tip-off from a local informant led to their capture. Alvin and Judith Neely were arrested in 1983 after a nationwide manhunt. The arrest was dramatic, with the couple caught in a small town in Alabama, trying to flee to another state. Alvin and Judith were charged with multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, sexual assault, and torture. Their trial was highly publicized, with many details of their horrific crimes revealed. The prosecution presented a damning case against the Neelus, detailing the victims' suffering and the couple's cold-blooded behavior. Psychological evaluations of both Alvin and Judith painted a picture of two deeply disturbed individuals. Alvin was found to have a violent personality disorder and a history of abuse, while Judith was described as having a dependent personality disorder, which led her to follow Alvin's commands. Despite the defense claiming Judith was coerced, the jury didn't believe it. Both Alvin and Judith were found guilty and sentenced to death. Alvin was sentenced to death by lethal injection, while Judith received the same sentence, making her one of the rare female death row inmates in the U.S. at the time. Neelus death sentences shocked many, as they were among the most notorious couples to be sentenced to death in the early 1980s. Their case became a symbol of how a toxic partnership can lead to unspeakable violence. The couple's crimes horrified the public, and their sentencing was met with mixed reactions. While some believed Judith was merely under Alvin's control, others felt that she had been a willing participant in the killings. Alvin's final words. Before his execution in 1985, Alvin Neely made a brief and defiant statement, offering no remorse for his actions. His words were filled with bitterness and anger, and he expressed no regret for the lives he had destroyed. Judith's final words. Judith, on the other hand, maintained that she had been coerced by Alvin. Her final words were an expression of regret for her victims, though they were seen as insufficient in light of the brutal murders she had helped orchestrate. Both Alvin and Judith filed multiple appeals in the years following their convictions, but their sentences were upheld. Alvin was executed by lethal injection in 1985. Judith's execution was delayed due to legal challenges, but she was ultimately executed in 1987, making her one of the few women to be executed in Alabama at the time. The case left a lasting impact on the criminal justice system, especially regarding the treatment of female accomplices in violent crimes. It also led to further discussions about the influence of toxic relationships on criminal behavior. What are your thoughts on Judith Neely's role in the murders? Was she an unwilling participant, or did she share in Alvin's violent tendencies? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling true crime stories. The Neelus shocking crimes are a stark reminder of the dangers that can arise from toxic relationships. But what happens when these kinds of relationships turn even darker? Number 7. Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown, a horrific cross-country killing spree. Alton Coleman, born in 1955, Coleman's early life was marked by violence and instability. He had a criminal history even before meeting Deborah Brown, with prior arrests for crimes like assault and theft. His violent tendencies were apparent from an early age, leading to a tumultuous adulthood filled with repeated run-ins with the law. Born in 1960, Deborah's background was equally troubling. She grew up in a chaotic environment marked by poverty and neglect. Her relationship with Alton Coleman was her first major criminal involvement, which would lead her to participate in a series of gruesome crimes. She was easily manipulated by Coleman's charm and charisma, even though she had a history of minor criminal activity herself. When Coleman and Brown crossed paths, they formed a toxic and deadly partnership. While Coleman was the mastermind, Brown was his accomplice, helping him with his crimes as they traveled across the country. Their bond was rooted in violence and a shared desire to control and harm others. The couple's crime spree started in 1984 when they began abducting, assaulting, and murdering their victims across multiple states, including Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Their first known victims were a 9-year-old girl and her mother. They would lure victims, often women and children, into their car, hold them captive, and then brutally assault or kill them. The couple's crimes escalated over time, with increasing brutality and frequency. By 1984, the duo had already committed multiple murders and assaults, often leaving a trail of bodies behind. They were also responsible for several violent kidnappings, targeting vulnerable victims who they later tortured and murdered. The spree continued until they were finally apprehended in 1984, following a series of high-profile crimes. Their violent rampage across several states left the public shocked, as authorities struggled to keep up with their trail of terror. As the couple moved from state to state, authorities began to notice similarities in the cases. The pattern of abductions, sexual assaults, and brutal murders led law enforcement to believe they were dealing with a serial killer duo. The investigation ramped up when they linked the murder of Mary and Lloyd Hensley in Indiana to the couple. After a tip-off from an eyewitness who had seen Coleman and Brown near the scene, the FBI and local police set up a nationwide manhunt. Investigators found witnesses who described the couple's car and provided details that led to a manhunt spanning several states. The couple was finally apprehended in Wisconsin, and they were arrested after a dramatic capture. Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown were charged with multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, sexual assault, and armed robbery. They were tried in separate courts across different states, as each crime took place in various jurisdictions. The cases against them were overwhelming, with forensic evidence, eyewitness testimony, and the couple's own confessions. During the trials, both defendants underwent psychological evaluations. Coleman was found to have antisocial personality disorder, but the court ruled that he was fit to stand trial. Deborah Brown, often described as an accomplice who was manipulated by Coleman, argued in her defense that she had been coerced into committing the crimes. The jury, however, was not swayed by her claims, given the horrific nature of the crimes. After a long trial, both Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown were convicted of murder and other charges. The court sentenced Coleman to death, and Brown was sentenced to death as well, making them one of the few couples on death row in U.S. history. The case shocked the nation. Coleman was widely regarded as a cold-blooded killer, while Brown's role in the crime sparked debate. Some believed she was an unwilling accomplice, while others felt she was complicit in the atrocities. The gruesome nature of their crimes led to widespread support for the death penalty for both individuals. Coleman's final words were filled with defiance. He never expressed remorse for his actions, and his last statement was a bitter reflection on his life, filled with anger towards society and the justice system. Brown, on the other hand, expressed regret for her involvement and begged for forgiveness. However, her pleas were not enough to sway the courts or the public's opinion. She maintained that she had been under Coleman's influence and was forced into the crimes. Both Coleman and Brown filed multiple appeals during their time on death row, arguing issues with their trials and sentences. These appeals were ultimately denied. Alton Coleman was executed by lethal injection on April 26, 2002 in Ohio. His death marked the end of his violent spree, but his legacy of terror remains in the memories of those who followed his case. Deborah Brown's death sentence was eventually commuted to life imprisonment. She was serving her sentence in a women's prison, and she remains incarcerated to this day. Her case continues to generate debate about the nature of her role in the crimes. What do you think? Was Deborah Brown simply manipulated by Coleman, or did she willingly partake in these heinous acts? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next chilling true crime story. Coleman and Brown's horrific crimes are just one example of a couple whose relationship spiraled into madness. But what happens when love turns to betrayal and violence? If you found this case as disturbing and thought-provoking as we did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more true crime stories. We've got many more chilling cases coming your way, so don't miss out. And if you're wondering what happens when couples like this fall apart, when one partner tries to escape the other's grip, stay tuned. In our next video, we'll dive into even more true crime stories involving couples whose love turned deadly. You won't want to miss it.